To get a sense of how Australians are reacting to this war, let's bring in our Monday regular Erin Molan for her take on Word on the Street. Erin joins me now from Sydney. I'll go back to that image of the bridge. The young Ukrainian soldier couldn't bomb up the bridge without killing himself, decided it was more important to get the bridge and halt the Russian advance, or at least slow it into Kiev. You're from a military family, Erin. This is harrowing.
Oh, it is, absolutely. Good evening to you, Peter. As the daughter of a retired Major General who spent a year in Iraq during the war, it really does hit home, but you don't need any military connection, direct or indirect, to feel completely heartbroken by the images that we're seeing. And I guess unlike in wars of years gone by, we are exposed to so much more in this day and age. There's a 24-hour news cycle. We can watch images everywhere. We can scroll on social media and see some of the brutality, almost like we are there. It is awful. And the real sentiment among Australians that we've spoken to today and over the past few days has been that of real sorrow, of helplessness and of fear. And you spoke brilliantly at the top of your show about this and what this needs to do for Australians. And for a large part, I think it has. It needs to be a stark reminder to us that we are vulnerable and that we cannot rely on any other nation in the world to protect us. But the overriding sentiment at the moment really is that of sadness.
A terrible situation for the people in Ukraine and their families that are left here.
It's absolutely disgusting, those poor people. Yeah, he just must be a lunatic, absolute lunatic.
I've got no involvement with any influence, but yes, we're all very concerned.
What can we do at the moment? If we did more, we might start another world war.
Yeah, I do. I think it's terrible. Putin's mad.
I'm surprised one of his generals hasn't shot him in the head.
I think the other thing, Peter, that it has a lot of us thinking at the moment was how would we react individually? And I've written a column on this. What would the youth of Australia do if they were asked to pick up a gun and fight for this country? And you mentioned this at the top of your show as well. And you look at the passion and vigour in which they will protest and march about climate change and gender equality and Indigenous affairs, other social issues. But do they like this country enough to pick up a gun and fight for it? It's a really fascinating discussion.
Well, we know that only until there were recent changes, the curriculum had termed Anzac Day a contested day. I mean, I've never heard of Anzac Day as contested, but that's what we were about to teach our kids. That's gone. We know that there's the Australia Day debate about Invasion Day and all of that recent activism around the 26th of January. So, you know, it's a good point you're making, and it's a good question you're posing to all of us, Erin. I'll read it with a bit of interest tomorrow. Let's move on to another subject a bit closer to home. 3 years now since the death of former Labor Prime Minister Bob Hawke. Anyone who knows their Australian history, he left a very indelible mark on modern Australia. Now, whether you vote Labor or not, he was a politician who wore his heart on his sleeve and he endeared himself to many of us. We know he had a public life of much achievement, but privately, and we heard a little bit about this over the weekend, we know about the drinking and the womanising, but I didn't even know that the womanising was as bad as it was reported on the weekend in the Weekend Australian. I tell you, he would have got cancelled before he even got pre-selected in politics today. The book I'm talking about, the new biography that was in the Australian newspaper by Troy Bramston, includes a suggestion from his widow, Blanche Delpouget, that he was a sex addict. What about all of that? 30 years on, he still fires up debate, doesn't he, Erin?
Oh, he really does. And look, it's a fairly sordid past when it comes to his personal life. And I feel very sorry for his wife and for his family that were clearly very hurt by some of his personal weaknesses, I guess, if you could call it that. But would we not have wanted him to be Prime Minister in this country? I mean, you look at some of the things that he introduced, Medicare, floating the Australian dollar, his real devotion to the working class man. Sorry, I should say and woman in this day and age. I wouldn't want to just say man, but he did achieve some great things. And Peter, I would much prefer to have a Prime Minister who might have had some vulnerabilities in his personal life and might not have been perfect in that way, but still was quite effective in his job as Prime Minister, than have someone that might have been maybe more well-behaved or morally self-righteous and was completely useless. And that seems to be the sentiment on the street as well.
Bob Hawke was a good leader for us.
Anybody could be a sex addict. you know, you're talking to anybody. But who cares about that? He's gone, you know.
He's dead. Let him go. Let him go.
I don't think that should be happening. No, definitely not. Yeah.
Shocking, absolutely shocking. He's an animal.
I like Bob Hawke. Leave him alone.
I mean, it is Australia, Peter, and we do love a larrikin, and we have tall poppy syndrome, but I think people almost seem to like you more when things that you haven't done particularly well are highlighted, or if you've failed, or if you've got some personal weaknesses. So, look, I don't think there's much love lost for Bob Hawke.
Well, I tell you what, I would much prefer a politician that gets stuff done and isn't perfect than one that is seemingly perfect but just minds the shop.
Doesn't.
Erin Molan, brilliant as always. See you next week.